Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our August meeting, the end of the summer. We've had a closed session, so internally we've already opened the board meeting. And now I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent for his comments.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, welcome to the August 28th Board of Education meeting. First, I'd like to take a moment to welcome our new Assistant Superintendent to the table, Mr. James Earl. So, James, welcome. Tonight we're joined by Coach Brian Gould from High School North and members of the High School North 4x1 mile relay team. They are the proud national champions, and I'd like to invite Coach Gould to the podium.
So I was just saying in the back that I talk in front of students all day, every day, and I'm incredibly nervous right now. The four guys that we're about to bring up here, I just want to say in West Windsor-Plainsboro that has a lot of great things going for it. I think these four guys are living, breathing examples of the learning that happens outside of the classroom. Four guys will come up here in a moment, and a few of those guys, when they got to high school, had immediate success, and a few of those guys were average athletes, and they had to work and work and work to achieve something so great. And through that hard work, tenacity, determination, devotion, loyalty to one another, and just a lot of sweat equity day after day after day. On June 17th, on Father's Day of this year, these guys ran the third fastest time in New Jersey state history, the 19th fastest time in the history of the United States of America, and were national champions at the 4x1 mile relay. So I'd just like to take this moment to recognize Matthew Santamaria, Luke Johnson, Padang Ladd, and Atharv Kulkarni. And just thanks again for having us. It's really a pleasure to be here. And to let these guys be recognized for such a once-in-a-lifetime accomplishment.
Thank you.
You have more to say?
I do. Yeah. Coach, we just want to say thank you to you and your family for coming out this evening. Also to your team, to their families for making the effort to be here this evening. We know two are graduating and off to college. And we know we moved the board meeting on you, so we also appreciate that you took the time to be here a week later than you had anticipated. But just a tremendous accomplishment. So you have a lot to be proud of, and you've left a legacy behind for your teammates. And I know two of your members will stay and keep working forward. They in their own right have some tremendous accomplishments that they've had individually, and I'm sure for the years to come. So congratulations to you and to the team. Thank you, gentlemen. I did want to take a moment just to give a couple other just broad updates regarding some of the construction projects around the community. So Maurice Hawk Addition. Anyone who has driven past Maurice Hawk this summer has seen a very active construction zone. And there has been lots of piles of dirt, and there's been a lot of underground work that had to be done. So when we look at Maurice Hawk and we looked at the project plan, what was accomplished and what has been being accomplished this summer is a lot of site work, underground conduit for electricity, underground sewage, new water main, underground drainage. So a lot of the underground drainage section in the back corner of the building was more than half of a football field, if you can imagine that kind of hole about 10 to 12 feet deep. So just a tremendous amount of site work. All of that had to be done before the ground could be then re-leveled, compacted rock and drainage put in so that then a pavement can be poured. And you may recall the amount of rain that we've received this summer, not just rain, but the deluge of rain, the tremendous evening flooding that we had. Every time it rained, it could set the contractors back 2 to 3 days. Remarkably, they've done some tremendous work, and while paving hasn't happened as of today, we expect paving to begin tomorrow for part of the drive, and by Friday, we anticipate having the ability to drive fully around that building, and with pavement being in throughout the parking lot, with striping being done as early as the 4th and 5th of next week, but before staff and students arrive for the first day of school. So while it is close, we anticipate completion of the underground work that's being expected. In a worst-case scenario, we would be driving across a portion of it on crushed stone, which is legal and is safe. We would never put a bus or vehicles across crushed stone if it wasn't safe, but we do believe it will be 100% paved around the loop. So it's just been a real testament to the contractors in the face of the weather that they've been able to get that work done. And then we'll be able to have the fencing is already going up, the sidewalks going up, the curbing was being poured. So a lot of site work responsibilities this summer. And then there's also then the actual foundations of the new addition have been poured and are being poured. So that's another component of the work that has to be done so that we can get towards the beginning of steel work by October is what's anticipated, mid-October. Tonight on the agenda, there's also a question with respect to Town Center Elementary School, and we had a bid opening for an addition at Town Center. That's in front of the board this evening for their consideration and vote. Additionally, there is a question on tonight's agenda regarding a referendum question for what a referendum, we've been talking about this for several months, but the referendum question of $114,875,000 is to bring forward renovations, rehabilitations, and additions at rehabilitation and renovations at all 10 schools and additions at 5 of the 10 schools. Hawk is not included in this, the work that we're doing this summer. Town Center is not included in the referendum. What this is an addition at High School South, High School North, CMS, GMS, and Wyckoff. So there's 5 additions and then renovations again at all 10 schools. So tonight, Dr. Russo will spend a moment during that portion of the finance agenda to sort of review the question and explain how the question reads prior to the board's vote. And lastly, I'd just like to send a welcome back to our community as we step forward into the 2018-2019 school year. There's a tremendous amount of curriculum writing. There's a tremendous amount of hiring and professional development training. As a district, we are looking forward and prepared for our students to arrive next week on the 6th, and we wish everyone a wonderful school year. So thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the first opportunity for public comment. The board invites thoughts and reactions on agenda items and items of concern from members of our community who are present. Each participant is asked to give his or her name and address prior to making a statement, which will be limited to 3 minutes. All statements should be directed to the presiding officer, and the public comment period in total shall be limited to 60 minutes.
Excuse me. Is this on? Okay. My name is Matthew Weber. I live at 8 Harrison Lane in Princeton Junction. My oldest daughter will be starting 2nd grade Hawk in the fall. And I had a couple of comments on the recent vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Okay. A couple of comments on the recent vote to introduce Class 3 officers into the school system. Not in favor of the program, but that ship has sailed, so I just wanted to offer a couple of comments going forward. The first is I hope the board will take heart the message that was delivered by your constituents in 4 hours of public comment at the West Windsor Town Council meeting on July 31st. I think the overwhelming theme, more so than opposition to the program, honestly, was just, people hearing about it days or hours in advance of the West Windsor meeting, well after the BOE meeting and Plainsboro Township Committee meeting where it was voted into effect. I think that speaks for itself. I think your constituents are asking loud and clear for more transparency in your operations. And I understand there was some effort to communicate it, but it seems like it wasn't enough. The second thing along similar lines is I know I believe, I'm not an expert or a lawyer, that the agreement doesn't mandate any particular data collection or data sharing around the outcomes of the program. So metrics of interest to the community like how many arrests are SLEOs making on campus, or changes in the volume and composition of disciplinary activity after introduction of an officer in the school. I think I personally would like to know, and I think a lot of the residents I've spoken to share similar desire just to sort of see what's going on. Along similar lines, I know the Operations Review Committee for the officers doesn't currently have any community representation on it. I've forgotten the exact composition. I think it's the superintendent and the police chief and township administrator of each town, maybe one other person. But if you can consider, even informally, adding a community representative, such as a parent or a teacher, to that committee, I think that would go a long way toward sort of showing goodwill in terms of exposing the operations of the program to the community. That's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, John Hinsdale, 38 Quaker Road in West Windsor. Can you hear me okay? 8 weeks ago, on June 26, 2018, this board voted 5-3, the smallest possible majority, to approve armed police in our schools. We are entitled to know the logic and motivations of the 5 board members who approved. Now, we'll be in the dark as to 3 of them, board members Whitfield, Juliana, and President Flores, who had nothing to say before voting yes. As for the 2 others who approved, board members Krug and Vice President Case, a sound basis for their yes votes is lacking. Specifically, Vice President Case called the decision, quote, years in the making, unquote, and said her support for using Class 3 officers, quote, solidified when the board had a lengthy and in-depth discussion on this topic at our retreat last December, unquote, referring to a 4.5-hour special meeting of the board 8 months ago on December 20th, 2017, with only 2/3 of the board present. If you read the approved minutes of that meeting, and it doesn't take long, it's only 3 pages, you'll see clearly that no discussion of the use of Class 3 officers or of security personnel of any kind took place at that meeting. It is therefore simply not a credible explanation that the meeting's discussions solidified or informed at all anyone's opinions on the Class 3 officers. As far as the decision being years in the making, there is no record of any discussion by this board about armed police in the schools prior to February 20th, 2018, just 6 months ago, when the topic was first brought up at a special meeting of the board on that date, where again only 2/3 of the board were present. What we should do is consider what the 2 members in favor, the 2 who bothered to comment, actually had to say. Vice President Case expressed strong emotion of being incredibly sad, to use exact words, but without any reference to objective facts or risks. From board member Krug, we heard a positive personal experience of her own with the police. Certainly a heartwarming story, but only that one anecdote, and nothing else to justify this policy affecting our large community. The common theme here is the board members focus on themselves and their own perspectives. The rest of us seem to be left out of the mix. And of course, the other 3 said nothing. Nothing. Any member of this board who cannot or will not explain their vote of approval on such an important measure, or worse, provides justification that doesn't exist, should not be voted back onto this board on Election Day.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to close the public comment then. One thing I just want to mention as far as public being aware of the Class 3, the proposal to use the Class 3 officers. It was, I may skip some of the items because I don't remember them all, but it was brought up originally at a public meeting in March. It was March 6th, the first meeting of March. It was discussed later on at the committee, at these public meetings, at committee reports. In April, the superintendent sent out a message to all the parents and staffs, if anyone's got their email address with the district, they got it, where the possibility of Class 3 officers and increased police presence is being considered by the board. It was the message on security, came out, I think it was April 12th. There was a presentation done at the May 8th meeting, which, where we talked about, for about an hour, with the the police chief from Plainsboro, and I think Chief Garofalo couldn't make that meeting, so Lieutenant Lee came. But we have representatives, both police departments and the superintendent spoke for about an hour at a public meeting about how the Class 3 officers would be utilized. That meeting went up, the minutes of that meeting and the video of it went up on the district website and has been broadcast on the cable channel. Matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, I still saw it on the cable channel. The local newspaper printed an article, a front-page article on it in May. I know that board members have had discussions. Some of us, some members have sent us emails about it. Members of the public came to make public comment. I think it was publicized. Yes, there probably were people who weren't aware, just like anything else, but I think the board did a very good effort to make the public aware of it. That's all I have to say to that. That brings us to committee reports, administration and facilities.
The Administration and Facilities Committee welcomed James Earl when we met on Tuesday, August 21st. Rachel Giuliana joined us in our discussions with bond counsel and our district architect to get a better understanding of the referendum question that appears on tonight's agenda. We reviewed the rules and legal requirements that dictate the wording and format of the public question. We discussed what the New Jersey Department of Education considers eligible and not eligible for debt service aid and why there are excess costs associated with the projects. The committee is satisfied that the wording of the public question meets state requirements. We continued our discussions with the architect when we reviewed the status of summer construction projects across the district. Projects that are close to completion are the turf fields at High School South and High School North, the High School South track, the gymnasium floor at Wyckoff Elementary School, and roof restoration at High School North and Grover Middle School. Work at the High School South pool and the bus loop at Community Middle School has been completed, and the renovations of the toilet rooms at High School South are still underway. We got an update on the progress being made on the construction taking place at Maurice Hawk School. As Dr. Adderhold said in his comments tonight, the focus of the work this summer has primarily been underground drainage, a water main system, underground site work, electrical work, etc. All work was required to be completed by the start of the school year. The new music room is close to being completed with an anticipated completion date for the beginning of school or shortly thereafter. Curbs are going up now, and at the time of our meeting, it was anticipated, and Dr. Adderhold validated that the paving would be done hopefully by the end of August. In all areas except for the large drainage area, which will have crushed stone. In order to ensure safety, Dr. Adderhold shared that he has asked that 3 police officers be on site at Hawk during the first 2 weeks of school to help with new car, bus, and pedestrian traffic patterns. Dr. Adderhold provided an update on the bidding process for the addition to be built at Town Center Elementary School. The lowest responsible bids appear on tonight's agenda for board approval. Next, we got an update on district security with an overview of upcoming technology upgrades. Members of the technology staff and administration met with Millennium and Matrix to discuss installing cameras in all schools, new phones in all classrooms, and strobe lights in areas where it may be difficult to hear announcements. A project manager will be overseeing the installation, and work will be coordinated with building administration, technology, building and grounds, and installers. All work will occur during the second shift, which means after 3 p.m. The administration and police were scheduled to meet the day after our committee met on Wednesday, August 22nd, to discuss next steps in the recruitment, hiring, and staffing of Class 3 officers. Updates about the district technology plans will be provided to law enforcement. The superintendent provided an overview on the hiring for Eyes on the Door security officers. At the time of our meeting, offers had been extended to 20 of the 26 anticipated positions. Dr. Adderhold shared the challenge of finding qualified candidates and noted that while all positions may not be filled by the start of the school year, there will be coverage in all 10 schools on day one. Eyes on the Door training is scheduled for September 5th. The New Jersey Department of Education provided guidance on the Uniform Memorandum of Agreement between education and law enforcement. The memo stated that districts are to follow the previous MOA until revisions are provided, and the revised MOA is anticipated in September. The committee got an update on our contract with the University Behavior Health Center at Rutgers to employ 2 full-time mental health clinicians. Interviews are underway, and we anticipate having staff on site by early to mid-October. We discussed the 2018-2019 District Nursing Services Plan, which is required to be submitted to the Executive County Superintendent annually. The board approved the statement of assurance at our July board meeting. Dr. Adderhold believed that the plan was presented by Mr. Dalton in June and referenced that at our July meeting. But after reviewing the A&F minutes, we realized that didn't happen. So the plan was reviewed to ensure that the committee saw the submitted report. Annually, the board enters into an agreement with the Thomas J. Rubino Academy to ensure that educational programs are available should a need arise to remove a student to an alternative placement or an interim alternative replacement for disciplinary reasons. The superintendent shared the written agreement and explained that placements at Rubino are for very severe offenses, and although rare, the district wanted to ensure that there was access to place a student if needed. The committee supports the agreements with Thomas J. Rubino Academy. The committee also reviewed the written agreement and shared information about CJ Pride. CJ Pride is an interagency committee of human resource directors that work to add diversity to our respective faculties by working together to attract and recruit diverse educators for teaching and administrative positions. The committee supports the shared services and membership agreement for CJ Pride. The committee reviewed and supports the submission of the third year of the 3-year comprehensive equity plan for 2016 to 2019. The comprehensive equity plan is required under code and outlines the responsibilities for achieving and maintaining compliance with all state and federal laws governing equity in educational programs. On tonight's agenda, there's a memorandum of understanding with Mercer Street Friends for the program Send Hunger Packing for the 2018-2019 school year. The committee supports the continuation of this program, which provides weekend meals for participating families. And finally, we reviewed some policies and regulations that appear on the agenda tonight for a first reading. Policy and Regulation 1613, Disclosure and Review of Applicants' Employment History, details the requirements of the Pass the Trash law that has been in effect since June 1st. Policy and Regulation 5561, Use of Physical Restraint and Seclusion Techniques for Students with Disabilities, describes appropriate physical restraint techniques for special education students. And lastly, the committee reviewed Policy 5512, Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying, to confirm our policy complies with recent changes in the law and mandatory updates. The updated policy ensures that all cases will be investigated fully. Additionally, the policy expands the definition to include incidents occurring on school district buses, at school-sponsored functions, and off-school grounds involving a student who attends an approved private school for students with disabilities. The policy further clarifies notification requirements to parents of students involved. Lastly, the required changes include the abolishment of Regulation 5512 as the requirements become included in the updated policy. The Administration and Facilities Committee will next meet on Tuesday, September 4th.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Curriculum?
The Curriculum Committee met on August 14th, and the committee recommends the authorization of the first year of a 5-year shared services agreement between Plainsboro Township and the West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District for cable television. The committee also recommends submission of the West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District Board of Education's District Professional Development Plan and District Mentoring Plan Statement of Assurance for the 2018-19 school year to go to the New Jersey Department of Education. As part of the ongoing Media Center collection management, the committee recommends approval of the disposal of obsolete items in accordance with Regulation 7300.1 as follows. Over 440 books from the Dutch Neck Elementary School Media Center, over 1,270 books from the Town Center Elementary School Media Center, 730 books from the Millstone River Media Center, 111 long-playing records from the Maurice Hawk Music Room, 27 compact discs from the Maurice Hawk Music Room, 38 cassette tapes from the Maurice Hawk Music Room, and 6 boxes of overhead transparencies from Maurice Hawk. All items meet one or more of the criteria of they're worn or damaged and preclude effective use, and economical repair or restoration is not possible. The committee recommends approval of several consultants to provide services in relation to and funded by the 2018-19 Star Talk Hindi Urdu Summer Program. The committee also recommends approval of 2 online resources, a 1-year agreement with the Exemplars Library to provide online resources for the Dutch Neck School in Spanish language from September through 1st, 2018 through August 31st of 2019 at a cost of $250, and a 1-year pilot of the Better World Education Program, a social and emotional global learning resource at a cost of approximately $2,600. The committee recommends approval of several professional development opportunities as follows: the innovative design for education to provide training sessions and instructional resources on student-centered learning to support the district planning team for goal number 1 during the upcoming school year at a cost not to exceed $29,950. Travel expenses related to the Asia Society Center for Global Education training sessions on global competence during the upcoming school year at a cost not to exceed $5,000, and 1 district staff member to attend the National Association of College Admissions Conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, at a cost not to exceed $1,647. The committee also recommends approval for several overnight trips: 3 Junior Statesmen of America trips to Woodbridge, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C., 3 Model UN trips to University of Pennsylvania, Rutgers, and Washington, D.C., and the Washington seminar trip in March of 2019, as well as the senior class trip to Walt Disney World, also in March. For High School South, we recommend approval of the same 3 Junior Statesmen of America trips and the Washington seminar trip in March. And for athletics, 2 trips for High School North cheerleaders, 1 to Pine Forest Cheer Camp, and the other to a national cheerleading competition in Orlando in February. The committee will next meet on Tuesday, September 4th.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, Finance didn't meet in the last month, so that brings us to the voting portion of the meeting. For Administration, can I have a motion on items 1 to 19, Martin and Isaac? Any questions or comments on the Administration items?
On number 8, it says total 360 days at Thomas Rubino Academy with student placements not to exceed 45 days. Why would a student go there for 45 days? Am I looking at the right thing?
Yeah, so there's something called an internal alternate placement under the code, which allows, under certain circumstances, for a 45-day placement without board authority. Under the code, a student has a due process right to they have a right to their education under 14th Amendment. My right as a superintendent is no more than 10 days suspension. The board principal's the same authority. Anything more than 10 days is an alternate placement in their educational program. Under this provision, there's a 45-day program that could be allowed under certain circumstances. For instance, and these are the what-ifs, God forbid scenarios, but like a weapons offense. So you could place 45 days pending a board hearing. So there may be a situation where next board meeting might be 4 weeks away, Some school districts are once a month, and occasionally we're once a month. And so it could be that we'll exceed the 10 days. This gives the authority for a 45-day placement pending a hearing. More often than not, our families elect to go on home instruction pending, but this just gives us an alternative option for placement.
So the student would, after 45 days, come back to the district?
Depends on the offense and depends on the determination through the disciplinary measure. Ultimately, that's usually determined at an expulsion hearing, which, again, here is few and far between. In fact, it's been years since we've ever had even a hearing in this district.
But within the 45 days, there could be a board action.
Oh, there would be a board, there would be a board hearing during that time.
Yeah.
What are we going up to 19?
Yes.
Because I have some questions about the regulations.
Sure.
Let's see. Okay, on policy number 5512, number 4, it says the district has involved a broad base of school and community members, including parents, students, et cetera, in coming up with a code of student conduct. Did we do that? This is the harassment, intimidation, and bullying. What page? 5512, page 5.
Carol, the code of conduct is reviewed annually, was through Mr. Dalton, and now it will be through Mr. Earl. And there's a process in place, usually with representatives from the PTA, PTSAs, to review that and give feedback on the process. It's reviewed at the building levels as well. And that's in the code of conduct policy 5600, which then speaks to policy 5512.
Okay. My other question is on page 13, and it says at the bottom that this is a suggestion. You may consider every mechanism available to simplify reporting, including anonymous reporting with locked boxes located in an area of the school where reports can be submitted without fear of being observed. Do we have those?
Do we have a drop box for?
Yeah.
I don't recall having that. I'd have to check with the building principals, but I believe the answer there is no.
That's to report bullying.
We have an anonymous bullying form online, and so there's a way for anonymous filings to occur, but I do not believe we have an official drop box.
Okay.
But we have an electronic format.
Okay, good. Okay, on page 17 at the bottom, it says, "The superintendent's report shall include information on any consequences imposed under the Code of Student Conduct." Will we see this in the HIB reports?
Jerry sends to the board members an HIB report prior to review. I'd have to re-verify what's included in that, but if it's not
Okay.
there already, it should be.
Okay. On page 18, it says that a parent, student, or organization may file a complaint with the Division on Civil Rights. Have any complaints been filed with that division?
There have been filings that have happened over time with respect to the Office of Civil Rights to the district. That's correct.
Are there a lot of them? Or, I mean, is it normal to have some all the time, or how does that work?
I don't necessarily know what's normal. Parents have the right, if they're not happy with a process being filed and they feel there's been some form of violation of the federal rights, to file with an agency through the Office of Civil Rights. Mr. Kachese, I don't know if you want to answer anything different, but it's not uncommon for an Office of Civil Rights to happen at least once annually. Since I've been in district, we've had at least one filing a year,
Okay.
on average.
Okay.
Just to be clear, if there is a filing, you're made aware of it. So
Okay.
The
Right.
board is made aware of it.
All right, good. On page 19, on the number 4 at the bottom, it says, "District-wide responses can comprise of adoption." I think the word "of" should be deleted,
We'll take a look.
okay? On
could-
page 23, the next to last paragraph, it says that we will have a week of respect, starting with the first Monday in October. Do we do that every October?
We do, and it's reported on in Mr. McDonald's presentation every fall.
Okay, good. Okay, that's that one then. On use of physical restraint and seclusion techniques for students with disabilities, on page 7, it says that training shall emphasize the use of appropriate de-escalation techniques and positive behavior supports, and it says that the board may consider additional training for staff members who will be responsible for implementing IEPs. which could include a framework that emphasizes de-escalation techniques, identifying BPSs, and behavior strategies which support appropriate behavior. Do we do all those things?
We do. We have a program called Handle with Care. We have trained certified staff members that can turnkey train. In fact, on the opening 2 days of school, we'll have over 20 staff members trained with Handle with Care training. We also have 3 BCBA's, Board Certified Behavior Analysts, to give support to our teachers and work in partnership with our special education department in this area as well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Since we're on this, I have just one question too on the policies. In the one with physical restraints, it makes references to approved private school for students with disabilities, and they have to abide by this also. Is there some mechanism that we have that shows that, I guess to be approved, they have to have the same policy? Like how are we, I'm not sure, how we, what mechanism do we have to be ensured that the private schools that we send kids to?
So I'm going to speak in general terms to
Yeah.
this, but if a student's being sent out to a higher level of care as a result of perception that the district's not able to meet the programmatic needs of the student, and that if it's in the area of physical aggression and/or behavioral concerns that might require restraint, we would then have a responsibility through the IEP development process to ensure that there's appropriately certificated staff members at the other sending school. And I would promise you that if a family is asking for such a program placement and the team's in agreement, everyone's going to want to make sure, parents and staff, that the student is in a safe placement. So that would be a component of the verification process.
Okay. It just, I agree, and I read it as it makes us responsible for what happens in that school. So I just want to know how they, but if they've got certificates and approvals for it, then I guess we're covered that way.
And I should say that all the schools that we send students to and out-of-district program placements are approved state schools. So they're approved by the state of New Jersey, and there's certain things that they have to show in order to be an approved school for a private school.
So David, that's why, I was curious when I read the policy, why it mentioned educational service private schools, and that's why, because they're where we send the kids, and that's why that's listed in the policy.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, this, if there are no other questions, I'll just remind everybody that this is the first reading. If anybody has any additional questions, please get them to the Administration and Facilities Committee, either Michelle or James, and they'll deal with it at the next meeting.
If I could add to that end, the second reading comes very quickly because September 11th board meeting, and our next committee meeting's on September 4th, which is the Tuesday after Labor Day, which is, we're going to blink today. It's a week from today, so we would ask that in consideration, if there is any feedback that you do, please provide that relatively quickly so we can make sure it's reflected in the policy, or at least the committee can discuss it. Thank you.
We have Monday off, so we can read the policy and get the comment in. Yeah. All right, any other questions on the A&F items? No?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Chang.
Yes.
Ms. Hertz.
Yes.
Ms. Ho.
Yes.
Mr. Krug. Ms. Krug, sorry. Ms. Krug. Sorry about that. I was already on Mr. Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Ms. Case.
Yes.
And Mr. Flaherty.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, curriculum, could I have a motion on items 1 to 8? Dana, Carol seconds. Any questions or comments on
I have a
curriculum?
question. On number 1, does this mean that our BOE meetings are now on cable TV? Are they on cable TV now?
This is the agreement in order to pay Mr. Watson's salary. We pay a part of the salary, and each of the townships pay a part of the salary.
So-
Right, but what I'm asking is, are these meetings on the cable TV now?
That is not part of the agreement. It is around the salary of Mr. Watson.
No, they're not.
But you said you were watching a BOE
They-
meeting on cable TV.
On our portion,
But those-
and these guys can correct me if I'm wrong, we have a certain amount of airtime.
Right.
And we don't put up the full meeting, but we have put up items of interest, like the referendum presentation, like the,
Oh, I see. Okay.
the Class 3 officer like, if it's a,
Special presentation.
yeah, something that,
Okay. Thank you.
and, okay.
Okay, my other question is on disposal of textbooks, books from the libraries. I'm wondering how many new books will be purchased?
I don't have the specific number. That will happen when the librarian gets their budget and takes a look at what books they've gotten rid of and what books are available and make a determination. So there isn't necessarily a one-for-one swap in terms of book. They'll take a look at their budget, and then they'll also take a look at what the needs are and what the current availability is.
And of the new books purchased, what percentage of them will be electronic books?
In terms for replacing these books that are non-electronic, they're none of them. We don't purchase electronic books, particularly at the elementary levels.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Hertz.
Yes, but I'm voting no on number 3.
On 3. Okay. Ms. Ho?
Yes.
Ms. Krug? Yes. Mr. Whitfield?
Yes.
Mr. Zhang?
Yes.
Mr. Cheng?
Yes.
Ms. Keish?
Yes.
And Mr. Flores?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, now's the, do the referendum question. I guess we'll hear a presentation, then I'll call a motion.
Is it video?
No, it's just a diagram. Yeah. So if you saw me, is this thing on? Okay. If you saw me snickering earlier when I heard long playing record, I thought of the interior of the diagram on this as the center to a 45, if you guys remember a record player. Most of you probably don't, some of you do.
Yeah.
The center of the 45, you spaced it in.
Yeah. Some of us know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I was snickering during this presentation. So, there's going to be, if the board approves the question tonight, there'll be a referendum in November at the general election. What you have tonight before the board is the question itself. The question is a legal question. It's written by an attorney. It's right out of statute. There really is very little leeway to make any changes to it. The attorney writes it pretty much verbatim from statute. So if you've seen the question online, in the first paragraph, the total project's $114.8 million. Then you go into, that's the total project. That is the amount that the board would have to bond to pay for the project. The second paragraph, you see the first number that comes up is $64 million, which is the eligible cost. In 2000, the Educational Facilities Funding Act was put into place. It created a facilities efficiency standards model, and that model doesn't represent a real school. It's just what the state said a square footage of a room should be, how many rooms are in the school, at what size and what grade level. It changed the square footage per grade level of a student. It also set a number of $143 per square foot for building costs. Construction costs in 2000 weren't 143. Actually, it said at 139. A year or two later, it went to 143. Actual costs back then were probably about $200 a square foot. So we get the eligible cost. The definition of eligible cost, and I'm reading pretty much the definition short version, is because I don't want any flavor to it. Eligible cost. Projects the state will provide 40% debt service aid, including renovations and new construction of the part that's eligible. based on the facility's efficiency standards model. So what that means is, if you have renovations, 40% of that $64 million, 100% of that is eligible, but it can only be funded at 40% because that's the highest the state will fund a project. So if it's renovations, they'll pay 40% of whatever 100% of the cost is. What you have here is you have $114 million, there's some ineligible costs and there's some excess costs. When you listen to this presentation, you can't put judgment on the definition of ineligible or excess cost because it's not a judgment by the state. It's based on a model. It's not what's right. It's not what's wrong. It's what the state says based on this box that they created, it's ineligible or ineligible. So of the $114 million, 64 is eligible for 40% debt service aid. What that debt service is, over the term of the loan, 20 years, let's say if we take a 20-year loan, debt service, we receive a piece of, a little bit of aid each year for our debt service payment. A debt service payment is your mortgage payment. That's what you consider debt service. You're on a project is your mortgage. The ineligible cost, not otherwise eligible, projects proposed that are in addition to the facility's efficiency standards model. If you remember, I mentioned a box. I mentioned a model they created based on what they felt was adequate in 2000. So what's not eligible in this project? Whole project's $114 million. Only 9.4 is not eligible. Again, not a judgment based on whether we need it or not, based on a model. An example would be science classrooms that are too big. In the model, a typical science classroom is 900 square feet. A typical classroom is 900 square feet. If you know what a school looks like, science classrooms have to be larger than that. So any additional space above that 900 square feet is ineligible. In 2000, robotics labs didn't exist. Robotics labs are ineligible. Dance studios didn't exist in the model, ineligible. And then there's also a piece to it based on student count, et cetera, et cetera. That $9 million is pretty much composed of community and high school staff. Whether a gym size is built to a normal gym size or a middle school gym size, those kind of issues. So the cost for ineligible, another piece that could create an eligible cost, if you have a school like South that was built in, was it 74 or 77 around that time, the hallways may be a certain width. Well, in 2000, the model, our hallways might be 25 feet wide. The model might call for a 20-foot wide hallway. Well, that 5 foot, the cost to extend that hallway is ineligible because it's not part of the model when you do the entire square footage of the building based on the model, based on the square footage allowance per student. So, first paragraph, $114 million. Second paragraph, the first number you see is 64.25, eligible cost, which I described. Ineligible cost, 9.4 million. They're the only numbers you'll see. Add those up, they don't total $114 million. What I mean is they're the two totals. You'll see the totals totaling 64, the totals totaling 9.4, but they won't total 114. The 40.9 million is excess cost. What's the definition of excess cost? Cost for new construction that exceeds the state allowance of $143 a square foot. Remember I mentioned $143 a square foot is the allowance that the state allows for us to build a school building. Costs now are going anywhere from $400 to $500. Realize this project goes out over 5 years. Cost of renovation is more expensive than new construction. Think about it in your own home. If they have to match something, make something meet, do something, tear something apart, construction costs, etc., that cost is more than just finding a fresh piece of ground and building a school or adding a wing and then connecting it. So this project, realistically, a build's going to be 5 years. So $400 to $500 per square foot is pretty much what the cost is going to be over that term. The state allows us $143 a square foot. So you can see why there's $40 million in excess cost. Statutorily, that's not discussed in the question. The state doesn't review that cost per se. It's there. So when you see the question, when you see it in the ballot box, tell 2 friends, and let them tell 2 friends, etc., and we'll try to get the information out as well, that the reason the math doesn't add up is because it's the excess cost piece which is the calculation of the cost over $143 per square foot. And when you see an eligible cost, that's pretty much the state just saying, the square footage you're building, you don't need. You don't need a 1,300 square foot science lab. You only need 900. You don't need a robotics lab. You don't need a dance studio. You don't need a hallway that's 25 foot wide. It's only 20 foot. You don't need a hallway that long. I think of South, I think of the hallway and the vestibule going forward in the construction project for safety. Well, that's all administrative square footage. Again, not eligible. So that's where that number comes from. So it's not a judgment on whether you're doing right or wrong. It's just whether they deem it eligible by the Congress. So that's the question. That's what you're voting on this evening. Any questions?
How big are the science labs going to be?
Say 12 or 13.
So, Chris?
Use the microphone.
So then, did you just say that all the security vestibule stuff is also ineligible?
Well, I was pulling South out because you're building administrative wings, you're building a hallway at a certain width to match a hall, match an opening, that sort of thing. That piece. Matt, you want to-
Yeah.
That's a great question. So, okay. Okay. Ogg Community Middle School and High School South, the secure vestibules are part of the new construction. They're part of the new additions, and therefore they're in the aggregate total of the money that's provided for the new construction. In the other schools where you're doing secure vestibules, they're considered to be rehabilitation projects. They are 100% eligible, okay, projects, and the state pays 40% of the cost.
I have a question. And when you say that the excess cost is, they won't help you with anything over $143 per square foot, but do they give you aid on everything under that? Like up to that amount?
They'll give us aid on the amount in the $64 million, which is the cost of renovations and
Right. So
12%, 11 to 15% of new construction.
11 to 15% of new construction.
I think
Okay.
it dropped lower than 11%, right? Okay.
Okay. So ineligible costs, you're getting no state aid. Is that correct? And same with the excess costs.
And realize, we're breaking this down for the sake of the question. And the reason I'm saying that is because as this goes out into the project, then those questions become much different.
Well, let me ask you this. For ineligible costs, you gave several examples. What are the examples of excess costs?
The difference, and realize the difference in the formula between $143 and the $400 to $500 in construction costs.
But that's true of the whole project, isn't it?
Yes, and that's excess. That's excess, because in the formula, they're only allowing you $143 for even what they're saying is eligible. They're only giving you 40% of $143. So anything above $143 would be considered excess.
Right. Okay. So that's the excess. Okay.
So in effect, it's the difference between the state allowance and the market cost.
Market conditions.
Yeah.
I have a question. Right now, our annual payment on the bonds that we have in place now to build, Grover and High School North, et cetera, is about $7 million, is that right?
7.8.
$7.8 million. So if we don't have any new bonds, then at the point when all those bonds are paid off, which would be 2028, then we would have $7 million less per year in our budget that we need to spend. Is that correct?
Well,
7.8.
the literal response to the question could be yes. But
Okay.
anything we're not doing in construction or repair, we'll be doing it in repair.
My only point is that that would be a benefit to taxpayers to not have $7.8 million a year that they were paying. So for you to say that this new referendum will not affect your taxes is not actually true. And as a taxpayer and homeowner, the point is that you were going to have borrowing at the same levels, perhaps, or bonds at the same levels, but it's not the situation that it is not going to affect our taxes.
Sure. So I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, it says no increase on, no increase to taxes for the sake of new
So-
construction.
So the debt payment, the annual debt payment will stay the same,
Right.
as if, to use an example, when a car loan is paid off, you get another car.
Right.
Yeah. And
Right.
yes, and I'll make the flip side because I think it needs to be said, that yes, the taxes, the district tax levy would be $7.8 million less, and we would have several hundred students that we wouldn't know what to do with. I mean, there is.
I understand.
Yeah.
I just think you should be careful in how you state this so that people don't feel like you're trying to put something over on them, but you're factual about it.
Yeah.
So we've tried to use the language that there be no increase on the construction portion of the debt, right? There'd be no increase. So in other words, what we've looked at is three mechanisms. One is expiring debt in 2022, 2026, and 2028. So as the debt drops, maintaining our payment at 7.8, 7.7 based on the year it kicks off, which would be theoretically in 2019, 2020, it would be about 7.7 million. If we maintain that annual payment, the third mechanism is drawing down on the cap reserve. So the public has noted that our capital reserve levels have been such, they're healthy. And there's been some statement and pushback about it's time to spend those down. And they've been collected to do this exact work. So what we're looking at is, again, is three mechanisms: maintaining that 7.7 million payment, taking advantage of the expiring debt, getting the 22.4, 22.5% back in state aid, which is about $25,770,000 in change, again, which is coming back off the $114,875,000. So in other words, those are eligible projects. And then, again, the third component being using the cap reserve, so anything that goes above 7.7 for that first 7 to 8 years, the differential between the payment and the 7.7 would be paid out of cap reserve, thereby drawing down cap reserve. So this one uses capital reserve dollars to maintain the flat payment or the no increase during that time. So it draws down the debt, draws down the cap reserve, at the same time maintains the 7.7 at a general fund. And it's critically important that everyone recognizes that we have the legal authority to collect the 7.7 million in addition to what we're collecting today. That 7.7 is at a general fund dollars. There's no other district that does that. We're incredibly well positioned. And there's a reason why this board has a AAA bond rating, and there's a reason why you've won Certificate of Excellence in Financial Budgeting for 10 straight years, because you've paid meticulous attention to your budget over time. So we're in this position to be able to do this for a zero tax impact. And we've talked in every presentation I've done, I make it very clear to say, that's not to say there will not be a 2% and somewhat increase, because salaries go up, electricity goes up, energy cost goes up, special ed tuition goes up, healthcare benefits goes up. There is going to be a budgetary increase annually. What we're talking about is the debt portion of the budget staying flat.
And there will also be a budget increase when you hire teachers for all the new classes.
Absolutely. If we're going to add classrooms, we're going to need to staff them with teachers. But the opposite of doing this is we lose the opportunity to take on renovations, rehabilitations, and address the new housing and the short and near-term residential growth. We don't take advantage of that expiring debt in 2022. You forego this right now, and you lose that several $1 million coming off. That will get reabsorbed back into the budget, and in the short term, it might feel like a budgetary tax relief to the taxpayers. At some point, your class size overcrowding issue is going to be such that you're going to have to put on a referendum this big, if not larger, because of the work you would have put off on the rehabilitation and the renovations. There's certain work that we can't put off, for instance, the $16 million and change HVAC system at High School North. We have significant air quality issues that need to be addressed at North, Millstone River, and Wyckoff. You know, those projects are over $20 million collectively, or closer to $25 million collectively. By doing these projects right now, you're getting 40% on the dollar on those projects. So there's certain there's a method to the madness as to why you go forward with a referendum and why you take advantage of the state aid payments through a referendum. And again, it's a lot about getting tax dollars back. Tax dollars that have gone out from this community to the state are able to come back through a referendum at 40% on the eligible state projects.
Getting back to the one thing, though, that you did bring up about there wouldn't be a tax levy there wouldn't be a tax increase for the debt. I remember in the 2006 referendum that the same statement was being made, that taxes wouldn't be raised to pay for the additional debt service. And it was the same situation at the time, that there was expiring debt, and at that time, I kind of remember the debt levy, the debt service was somewhere around $9.5 million. And from 2006 on, the debt service never went above that amount. Like, we never raised taxes to pay for that. So I think the public can understand, then we'll be clear that we say it the right way, but I think they can understand that, yes, if you don't borrow money, there's that much less you have to spend at some point. But then again, we'll also have to provide an education.
And just for members of the public that will ultimately watch this, all the board votes on tonight is the right for the question to go forward on the public ballot on November 6th. The board's authorization, should the board authorize this question this evening, does not mean that you're authorizing the money or the referendum. It simply means you're authorizing the public's right to vote on the referendum.
But if the public does approve in the vote, the referendum, then the board is obligated to carry through these projects,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
So,
Correct, but all
in
this
essence, we
question-
are voting for that tonight.
No, but
No, you're voting for the public's right to vote on it.
Right, for the
Yes.
public's right to vote, yes. But it's a commitment,
yes.
No
that
doubt.
if they vote yes, we
Correct.
will execute. Okay.
Absolutely.
Any other questions of Dr. Russo? Okay, thank you. All right, can I have a motion just on the item C, finance referendum resolution, Louisa and Michelle? Any board member want to have a discussion? You're hearing none?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On number 5, it says, "The Board of Education acknowledges receipt of a preliminary eligible cost letters from the Department of Education." Have we received those? I mean, I haven't seen them, but,
Yes, has it been reviewed at the Finance Committee? Because the PEC letters are what determines the ineligible, the excess, and the eligible. That's how that question
Okay.
comes together.
okay.
Any other questions? Chris?
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Ho.
Yes.
Ms. Krug.
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Mr. Chang.
Yes.
Ms. Hertz.
Yes.
Ms. Case.
Yes.
Mr. Flares.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Now, finance, could I have a motion on items 1 to 31? Taylor and Louisa? Any questions on the finance items?
Can you tell me what is an encumbrance and what is a fund equity?
Sure, an encumbrance is...
Where is that?
What's a fund equity and what's an encumbrance?
Where is that?
Encumbrance is a bill that's from a prior year that's moved forward. And it actually doesn't have to be that, but it may show up on that. It's basically, there's an order out there for us to pay it. It's the money's encumbered.
Okay.
Fund equity is when you take your assets and your liabilities, the difference is the fund equity.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
We'll start with Ms. Krug.
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Mr. Cheng.
Yes.
Ms. Hertz.
Yes.
Ms. Ho. Ms. Geish.
Yes.
Mr. Flares.
Yes, except that I'm going to abstain on item 1A, the bill list for August 28th.
Okay.
Okay? Personnel, can I have an motion on items 1 to 4, plus we have a rainbow of addenda here. There are 4 addenda sheets, blue, yellow, green, and pink. We couldn't have too many more addenda, we run out of colors. Taylor and Michelle. Any questions on the personnel?
I have a question. Does this represent all the stipends for the school year, or will there be more at the next board meeting, or?
It represents most.
Okay, because my question is, I looked through this, and I looked through the personnel report from our last board meeting, and I did not see any stipend for mock trial or science bowl, and I'm wondering why that is.
Well, all of our stipends, staff members have to apply. We have a posting. So there's a process in going through, selecting who will be achieving the stipends, and then it's a matter of being sent and prepared for the board.
Just to add to that, that comes from the building to an HR, and so the building sends forward a recommendation through the principal secretary. After the posting is up by the contractual amount of time, interviews occur. Sometimes there's no applicants, so positions might come in later. And so postings stay up, there's a contractual component, interviews occur, it goes forward to HR, it's reviewed internally, and then it goes forward to the board as an agenda item. If it's not submitted from the building, there's nothing for us to bring forward.
Any other questions? We have a vote?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Mr. Cheng.
Yes.
Ms. Hertz.
Yes.
Ms. Ho.
Yes.
Ms. Krug.
Yes.
Ms. Geish.
Yes.
And Mr. Flares.
Yes. I do want to acknowledge 2 retirements at tonight's meeting. Michelle Bostwick, a teacher at Wyckoff, is retiring after 24 years with the district. And Peter Hasinko, a bus driver who's retiring after 25 years with the district. I want to thank them and wish them well in the future. All right, can I have, next item is approval of the minutes for July 24th.
Tony, can I ask one question I should have asked earlier? In the A&F committee, it says that they're installing cameras with 100% coverage in all schools. What does 100% mean? Does that mean bathrooms, locker rooms, classrooms? What does that mean?
There's certain places legally we're not allowed to videotape, so it's talking about hallway coverage, parking lot access, things like that. So there will not be cameras in the bathrooms, locker rooms, things like that.
Okay, would they be in classrooms?
They're not, there's not in instructional spaces as well, but they would be in the hallways that you'd be able to pick up hallway access.
Okay.
So you should be able to see who's going into what doors.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can I have a motion on the minutes of July 24th? Isaac and Dana. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm abstaining. I wasn't at that meeting. Any liaison reports? Any new business? This is the second opportunity for public comment. 15 minutes will be provided at the end of the meeting for public comments. Each Participants asked to give his or her name and address prior to making a comment, which will be limited to 3 minutes. And all statements should be directed to the presiding officer.
Joy Horton, 10 Hopkins Court in Plainsboro, New Jersey. I just want to comment back on, Anthony, your comments regarding the communication regarding Class 3 officers. I think the board, the school district has to do a better job. You have to find a way. You have to find a way to communicate better to the parents. Over the summer, we had 105 kids at our summer math program, and I heard countless times from the parents how they're still not getting the information. I know that I come to the board meetings, but a lot of parents don't come to the board meetings, so we have to figure out another way to get a hold of the parents and make sure that they're getting some of the critical information, especially something so critical as the Class 3 officers being deployed at all the schools. One of the things is, social media. I know that you guys are looking at hiring a public relations or a social media officer or someone. I don't know where you're at with that.
Hired tonight.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. Well,
Starts tomorrow.
excellent. I know if you go on, even I have the app on my phone, but I know when I click on West Windsor-Plainsboro, the facilities referendum, there should be certain stuff that's front and center. If you go to the Princeton app, you can see the their facilities referendum on the home page. So there's just certain things that you want to make sure you do. But hiring of the social media officers is very, very critical. But please, please, please find a way, because I cannot tell you how many times I heard it from the parents. I also heard from the students over the summer about that they weren't made aware, or what are they going to do when we come back? Are they going to have an assembly? What's going to happen? So you want to make sure that you get that communication out there for the students as well. So just want to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Plans to educate the students about the constructions that's going to go on, or possible construction?
About the construction.
I just want to make sure the construction. So there's not a specific targeted plan for the students around the referendum, if that's the question. There is a communication plan that will roll out. Well, now that the board has approved the question, there's certain dollars this Board of Education has approved for one contract for 2 mailings, and then the rest of it is on the district staff to determine how we're going to communicate out information above and beyond that. Thank you to Mr. Watson. Jamie has been critical in helping us build a video series this summer. So we have a 55 approximate minute video, broken into, it's technically 9, it's how many? 12 chapters. There's an elementary section that's 4 different chapters, but there's 12 chapters to it. So if a parent is only interested in their particular school or the sending path of several of their children, they can choose the chapters they watch. If they want to watch the entire thing, they can watch the full 55 minutes straight through. If they only care about the financing, there's a financing section. If they only want to hear the overview, they can hear the overview. So we'll be sending that out. We'll be tweeting that out. Once we get that up and running, we'll be able to send that out through our PTA and PTSA representatives. We'll be able to run it on the cable station. So there's different ways we're looking to try to get information out, with the recognition that many of our audiences actually this is a large group tonight, and half of it's family members. So at least for one board member.
Are you also telling all the parents at Maurice Hawk what's going on?
In the referendum video, we refer to Maurice Hawk so that they know it's separate and apart.
But I mean, for the first day of school, do they realize what's going to happen the first day of school?
Ms. Buell has been communicating messages as the principal, and if they've driven past it, they're concerned about it, right? So the question we get most is, will it be paved and will there be a sidewalk? Right, and if they drive by today, there's now a sidewalk. So it should be paved by Friday.
And I'll just add that during each building, as work goes on at those buildings, I have faith the administration in that building will keep their students aware. I remember in South was a construction site for 2 or 3 years, I think, at one point, when we were putting on the theater and the gym. So, I'm sure that at the building level, they let people know. That just has to be, as construction happens, that's specific to that building.
One thought that crossed my mind repeatedly this summer is that we should not be taking votes on an issue like Class 3 police officers in the summer when many, many residents are away.
Okay, first of all, you could have said that before we did take the vote, but in any case,
But you
I
know,
went through before, we spoke all spring.
But why
From
didn't you
March
take the
on.
vote in early June or in September?
If we did it in September, we would miss the start of the year. And in June, it wasn't ready. And the public had plenty of time to offer us their comments. They don't have to wait to the day of the vote to get up and say something. You've said several times during the spring, you've spoken to lots of parents. So
Yes.
parents must have known.
Well, I don't know
they
all the
ga-
parents.
And they gave you input,
Yes.
and you provided that input. That's the process, that's what's supposed to happen.
I'm just saying, I think the community would have felt better about this if it was not done in the middle of summer.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Or any other comments? Fine, that's it. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Isaac and Taylor. Those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you for coming out.